Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn Tosfos Dibra Maschal, Pashat Malabayas Es Yadei. Let's begin by looking at the general outline of the Tosfos. In the Mishnah, we count separately the cases of the Balabayas and the cases of the Ani. We don't say there's Haitzah, and it includes everybody, and there's a Melacha of Achnasa, and it includes everybody. Rather, we say there's Haitzah of the Ani, and there's Haitzah of the Balabayas. There's Achnasa of the Ani, and there's Achnasa of the Balabayas. And that's what Tosfos is going to discuss. Tosfos will ask why we count the cases of the Ani and the Balabayas as two cases. He'll answer the question and provide two proofs. And then the second part of Tosfos is this will lead into a discussion of what it takes to be classified as an Av and Tolda by Haitzah. And let's see that now inside in Tosfos in the flowchart form. So re-ask the question, why does the Tana make the owner and the poor man into two dinim? The words of Tosfos is Mas Shayach L'Kreisei Shtayim. How does it make sense to count it as two? We don't say there's Haitzah of a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, and a 50-year-old. We say there's Haitzah, it applies to everybody. But for the Ani and the Balabayas, we say that there's two Haitzahs. There's one for the Ani, one for the Balabayas. How does it make sense to say that? Tosfos answers that being that Haitzah is a malacha grua, it's a weak malacha, therefore we wouldn't, if we only said that the Balabayas is chayiv, we wouldn't know the Ani is chayiv. If we said the Ani is chayiv, we wouldn't know the Balabayas is chayiv. And that's basically the question and answer of Tosfos, and the rest of Tosfos will be proofs and an extended side discussion. But let's stop here for a moment, because in a way we didn't really answer our question, it would seem. Because we started off saying, why do you teach both? It should all be included under the category of Haitzah, a general malacha. There's Haitzah, it includes everybody. We answered, since it's a weak malacha, we can't learn the Ani from the Usher and the Usher from the Ani. But the question, however, seems to remain. We don't teach a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, and a 50-year-old. We don't say that it's necessary to teach all of them because Haitzah is a malacha grua. Why for the Ani and Usher, we say it's a malacha grua? As a result, we need to teach both of them. We must say that in a certain regard, the Usher has more of a reason to be chayiv, and therefore from him we wouldn't know the Ani. And we have to say in a different regard, the Ani has more of a reason to be chayiv, and therefore if we didn't say the Ani, if we said only the Ani, we wouldn't know the Usher. So we'll explain that for a moment. The classical case of Haitzah is that a person picks up an item in Rosh Hashanah, carries it out to Rosh Hashanah, and puts it down. But let's look at our case. That's not what happened. Each individual stayed in his Rosh. So let's first look at the Haitzah of the Ani. When the Ani did Haitzah, he lifted it up, he did Akira, he brought it out, and he did Hanacha. The Ani over here has a good Hanacha. Just like the person who did the real Malacha walked out and put it down, the Ani also, he was out on Rosh Hashanah when he put it down. However, his removing it from Rosh Hashanah was not a real Akira. It wasn't a real removing, because he didn't go into the Rosh Hashanah to remove it. Therefore, he has a weak Akira and a good Hanacha. The Balabayas, on the other hand, is the opposite. When he did Akira, he extended his hand out and put it down, did the Hanacha, he has a strong Akira. He lifted it up properly, just like a regular person who's starting the Malacha of Haitzah. However, putting it down to Rosh Hashanah was a little weak, in a sense that he didn't go out into the Rosh Hashanah to put it down. And therefore, he has a good Akira and a weak Hanacha. And therefore, if we were to say that the Balabayas, for instance, is chayiv, we'll say, because the most important thing by Haitzah is to remove it from the Rosh that it's in a proper way. And then you're putting it into the other Rishus is secondary. The point is that it's leaving this Rishus, and the other Rishus is just the completion of the Malacha. And therefore, the Balabayas who has a good Akira will be chayiv, but the Ani who has a weak Akira will be patur. If we, however, said that the Ani was chayiv, we'd say the main thing by Haitzah is to put it down fully into a new Rishus. That establishes that it's removed from the original Rishus. And therefore, we would say that the Ani who did a real good Anacha, he'll be chayiv, but the Balabayas who didn't properly put it into the next Rishus, he's going to be patur, and therefore we need to teach both of them. Let's now continue on with Tosfos. So we gave this answer that it's a malacha grua, therefore we wouldn't know one from the other. Tosfos now is going to bring two proofs to this. Proof number one is that we find that there is two psukim to teach us the malacha of Haitzah. One pasuk is Moshe Rabbeinu told the people that there's enough malacha done for the Mishkan. It says, and they stop bringing things. So we see there's enough malacha, they stop bringing. That means bringing, carrying is considered a malacha. They start bringing things. And the second pasuk that we have for Haitzah, Moshe, here we have an explanation of the pasuk. Moshe told the Yidden to stop doing the malacha of helping with the Mishkan, and then it says that as a result the Yidden start bringing items for the Mishkan. So we see that bringing things is considered a malacha. And the second pasuk we have is it says Al Yetze Ishbim Kaimei, and the Gemara explains that Al Yetze means Al Yetze, not to carry out. Why do we need two psukim? The explanation is we need one for the Ani and one for the Usher. One Haitzah is the Haitzah of the Ani and one is for the Usher. So we see that it's a weak malacha, and in addition we see that as a direct result of that, we need two psukim when it comes to Haitzah. Now we'll present the second proof, that Haitzah is a malacha grua. Generally speaking, by all other malachas, the Av was in the Mishkan. They told us they were similar to the Av, and as a result they're classified as told us. They weren't found in the Mishkan. However, we find that by Haitzah, not only does the Av have to be in the Mishkan, the Toldus need to also be in the Mishkan. We see this in three places. Now, why is one classified as an Av and the other as Toldus? Because it says not only in the Mishkan, it's also written in the Pasuk. We just brought two Psukim. Where do we see this? We see it in 3 places. Number 1 is Moishit. If somebody passes an item from one Rosh Hashanah to another Rosh Hashanah across the street, that were across from one another, opposite one another, and it's over Rosh Hashanah, if he passes or throws it, he's patur. However, if it's on the same side of the street, if he passes, he's chayiv, and if he throws it, he's patur. Why only if we're passing and only on the same side is he chayiv? Because that's how it was in the Mishkan. Now, Moishit is only a tulda. We see that even though it's a tulda, it needs to be in the Mishkan. The second place we see this is, the Gemara later attempts to find where was Zayrik Dalat Amos, throwing Dalat Amos in the Mishkan. The Gemara sorted out to find where it was, and the Gemara had to ultimately conclude it never happened in the Mishkan. It's halacha l'meishim Sinai. But we see that in order for it to be classified as a tulda, because Dalat Amos Rishus Rabbim is carrying Dalat Amos Rishus Rabbim is only a tulda, we needed to find where it was in the Mishkan, and only because we couldn't, we concluded that all the cases of Dalat Amos and Rishus Rabbim are halacha l'meishim Sinai. And the third place we see it is by Achnasa. The Gemara says that just like they lifted up, Heim Helu Krushim Makarka Lagola, they brought beams from the ground onto the wagons. Af Atam al Tachnisa, so too you shouldn't bring in. So we see that also Hachnasa, which is only a tulda, needed to be done in the Mishkan in order for it to be categorized and classified as such, as a tulda. So this is really completes the first part of Tesis, which is our question: why do you need to teach a case for the Ani and one for the Balabayas? And our answer is because since it's a Malacha Grua, we couldn't learn one from the other. And Tesis brings 2 proofs to this. The first proof is that it's a Malacha Grua and directly affects that we can't learn one from the other. And that's why we have 2 psukim for Eitzah, one for the Ani and one for the Balabayas. And the second proof is just the general idea that we find that Eitzah is weaker than the other Malachas, and therefore its Tuldas need to actually be found in the Mishkan, whereas the other Malachas, the others need to be in the Mishkan, the Tuldas don't need to be. Now let's continue with a side discussion. Tesis now asks, if that's so, that it was in the Mishkan, why does the Gemara later need to tell us that, how do we know Achnasa is chayiv? Because Mali Afuki, Mali Yule. What's it to me if a person brings it out of Rishus, what's it to me if somebody carries out of Rishus HaYachid or into Rishus HaYachid? It's the same thing. He's taking it from Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus, or from another Rishus to Rishus HaYachid. The Gemara says that because there's no difference at all between Eitzah and Achnasa, that's why Achnasa is chayiv. Now, why do we need that logic for? From the case of Zerik Dalat Amos, we clearly see in the Gemara that although there's no logic for Zerik Dalat Amos to be chayiv, nevertheless, if we'd find it in the Mishkan, that would be enough for us. So why by Achnasa is it not enough that it's in the Mishkan? We mentioned Achnasa was in the Mishkan. They brought the beams from the ground into the wagons. So it was in the Mishkan. Why is it necessary for the Gemara elsewhere to tell us that it's based on a logic? Tosfos answers that the svara that we presented, Mali Afuke, Mali Ayule, what's it to me if he takes it out of the Rosh Hashanah? What's it to me if he brings it in? Either way, he's transferring between these 2 Rishayas. That wasn't used for the Achnasa that we have in the Mishkan. The Achnasa in the Mishkan is that the person was standing on the ground and carried it in. That's Achnasa of the Ani. The reason we have the svara for is Achnasa of the Balabayas. How do we know if the Balabayas does Achnasa is chayiv? We said we can't learn the Ani from the Balabayas and the Balabayas from the Ani. For that we have a svara. Just like the Balabayas is chayiv for Heitzah, for sure he's chayiv for Achnasa. Now, so we completed that idea. Now Tesis goes to a side point. 1 second. So if we have this svara, once we have the svara, so why do we need the case in the Mishkan? Why did the Gemara ever need to tell us that Achnasa is done in the Mishkan? Why don't we just use the svara for all cases instead of using the case in the Mishkan for the Ani and the svara for the Balabayas? The Ani as Achnasa is in the Mishkan and the Balabayas is from a svara. The svara does both of them. Why don't we just say that since there's a svara Mali Afuki Mali Yule, there's no difference between Eitzah and Achnasa. Therefore, just like the Ani and Balabayas are chayiv for Eitzah, they're also chayiv for Achnasa. Why is it necessary to bring a case for the Ani? Why did the Gemara have to present it? So Tesis answers the Gemara didn't need to present it. It just brought it derech agav. Since we mentioned that Heitzah was in the Mishkan, so the Gemara finished off and said also Achnasa was in the Mishkan. But the truth is we don't need that Achnasa should be in the Mishkan, because once we have the svara, that's satisfying enough for us. Now this leads to a side question, because we're saying over here that the only reason Achnasa is mentioned is because Heitzah was mentioned. We need to justify, why does Heitzah need to be in the Mishkan? We just said that there's 2 psukim that Heitzah is an Av, is Asar and Shabbos. Why did it have to be in the Mishkan? Says Tosfos, even though it says written clearly in the pasuk, we didn't need to say it, and only because we said it did we mention Achnasa. Why did we need to say it? Because if Eitzah wouldn't be in the Mishkan, then we would say, look, it doesn't need to be in the Mishkan, and a malacha doesn't need to be in the Mishkan in order to be chayiv. Look, Eitzah is chayiv; it's not in the Mishkan, and we would therefore make a mistake and conclude that anything that's a complete malacha, as far as we decide, based on whatever criteria Chazal would say, is Asar and Shabbos. So it wouldn't be limited to what was in the Mishkan. And therefore we needed Eitzah to be in the Mishkan to show us that all malachas need to be in the Mishkan in order to be considered an Av. Now, we mentioned the hypothetical over here, that if Eitzah was not in the Mishkan, we would say that it's not necessary for Malacha to be in the Mishkan in order to be considered a Nav. But then we need to explain a question, which is, we know that the parsha of the Mishkan is next to the parsha of Shabbos to teach us that what is Asar in Shabbos, what was done in the Mishkan. So how would we explain them being close to one another? In our hypothetical that Eitzah was not in the Mishkan, we would say it's not necessary to be in the Mishkan to be considered a Nav, as long as it's a complete Malacha based on the judgment of Chazal, it would be Asar. Then how would we explain the two parshas being together? Says Tosfos, and this that the pasuk of Shabbos is near Melechas HaMishkan, because and here just the scroll explains this. We explained that the closeness teaches us that whatever was in the Mishkan is a malacha on Shabbos. So how can we make a mistake that it doesn't have to be in the Mishkan to be a malacha? So Tosfos says we'd find some other reason for that, for the two psukim being one another. We wouldn't say that they're next to one another to teach us that only what's in the Mishkan is a malacha, because we clearly see is a malacha on Shabbos, because we clearly see Eitzah is a malacha and it's not in the Mishkan. And with that we're done the Tosfos. So let's summarize. We have over here the question of Tosfos, which was, why do we need to teach a case for the ani and one for the balabais? Let's just teach one, and that'll be enough. The general isser of Eitzah, the general isser of achnasa, and we'll know it applies to everybody. And the answer is that being that Eitzah is a malacha grua, and like we explained, there's a difference between the ani and balabais. Each one has a strength and a weakness. We couldn't learn one from the other. Then Tosfos moved on to bring proofs to this that Eitzah is a malacha grua, and what led to a side discussion specifically around achnasa, that we find that achnasa has both, that it was in the Mishkan and it has logic. How do we reconcile presenting both of them? Why wouldn't it be enough to just say one thing, whether it was in the Mishkan or the logic? And Tosfos resolved that on the side.